Emoti, Celebrant a Bounty. Emoti is one of the only Simic commanders, in my opinion, that deserves a big fat thumbs up emoji. This free, a green, and a blue general grants your spells with CMC 6 or more cascade, making each game with her in the command zone a spectacle of free spells. The ceiling on this card is so high you can see us still trying to reach it, where if we cast a spell with CMC 7 and above, and hit a spell that requires at least 6 mana to cast normally, we get an additional cascade trigger. The first question we need to answer when building this deck is, how do we start this chain reaction? My retort to that is the necessary inclusion of reusable cascade enablers. Spells with CMC 6 plus that we can recur and reuse reliably. Tangle Golem is a sparkling gem from Darksteel that has an affinity for forests. No, I don't mean he gets wood from being in the woods. This artifact creature costs 1 less for each forest you control. Being able to cast this 7 drop for next to nothing can give us a huge advantage early in the game. If you keep in mind Simic's ability to shoot a land to the battlefield, due to its seldom costing 7, you will have additional mana to spend on effects to get more value from its cascade trigger, with cards like Equilibrium and Voltaic Key. Aether Whale is another 7 drop with an activated ability that will allow it to slip and slide to and from your hand to give you a torrent of cascade triggers. While a quick skim of the card might make it seem like a do nothing, the fact is that it gives us a resource to act its ability and returns to our hand for free, which I feel outweighs the lack of a relevant impact on the battlefield upon entering. A parallel we can use to better understand the role Aether Whale plays in this deck is the new Seek mechanic. Functionally, in combination with Emoti, this card reads as a creature that says, when you cast this card, seek for a card in your library with converted mana cost 6 or less. A problem we're going to encounter when playing a deck with such a high density of expensive spells is that set spells can be stuck in our hands. We can circumvent this using Leashling, a 6 mana casting cost artifact creature from Original Ravnica. In addition to synergizing with Emoti's ability, it can return itself to the hand for the small cost of putting a card from your hand on top of your library. Its usefulness in its Emoti build is not limited to this scenario, as we can repurpose its Brainstorm-like ability to select spells from our hand which we want to cast with our cascade triggers instead of hard casting them. As you can probably see from the inclusion of Leashling, card selection is a higher priority when composing a cascade deck. With such high mana investments, whiffing on cascade trigger or hitting a card that is dissonant to the stage or environment of the game can essentially have us having a little effect on the match as skipping a turn. This is why I think it's dire to include reliable selections such as Scroll Rack, which essentially allows us to trade our hand for a number of cards from the top of our library, equal to the number of cards we had in our hands. Whilst fulfilling a similar function to Leashling, Scroll Rack has a utility early game to make sure you always have something to play, permitting you the ability to put back uncastable cards and refreshing your drawers if used in conjunction with a shuffle effect like a fetch land. To further decrease our chance of hitting a land late in the game, we can include Abundance, which as the name suggests, has a repeatable abundant harvest effects that replaces your drawers by having you choose between land or non-land, and reveals cards until you hit your preferred option. A good included in the majority of green decks is especially useful in cascade builds, as being able to select for a land for a couple of turns helps efficiently thin the deck with them. Hence, we're less likely to hit a land that will be exiled through our cascade triggers. With Eutropia in your command zone, your opponents can't help but look twice but only want to face her once. Her Constellation ability makes her a great Enchantress payoff and finisher available in the command zone, as she can make herself and other creatures of your choice as big as you have enchantments to commit to the board, while also lending herself to the traditional Simic +1/+1 counter synergies. The primary way we can enable Eutropia is the use of bounceable enchantments to trigger her ability multiple times in a turn, simultaneously profiting off classic Enchantress pieces in the process. At free CMC, you can reliably cast her in the early game, and thus use enchantments such as Spreading Algae to help push your opponents down on your climb up to our figurative Mount Olympus. This one drop can be venomous to black decks, as it can only enchant a swamp and destroy said swamp once it becomes tapped. This card scales very well after multiple black decks at the table, since when the enchanted land is destroyed, you get to return the aura to your hand. With the potential to possibly lock mono black decks out in the early game, it can also punish decks with 3 colours or more that include black, as without an optimal mana base, one swamp could be the only source of black, making it want to take you on a personal journey to Hades. Redundancy is key to consistently giving Eutropia the strength of Heracles, so the inclusion of non-conditional recurable auras such as Shimmering Wings and Whip Silk are dire. Shimmering Wings gives Eutropia a permanent pair of Icarus's wings for the low cost of 1 blue, and can bounce itself for the same cost, while Whip Silk allows it to touch Helios without leaving the ground for green, and bounce itself for a single green. If you've piloted a Voltron deck, You know one of the biggest blowouts is having your commander removed with an array of auras attached to them. Due to Eutropia's ability to distribute counters wherever, whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, we can force our opponents to make a hard choice with their removal, because we can attach our auras to another creature and still have our general reap the rewards. With our auras attached to a benign dork, we can use Mark of Eviction to reuse the auras attached to him every upkeep. Along with the quintessential Enchantress pieces in green, we can utilise Eutropia's affinity for Poseidon to access the +1/+1 counter synergies in Simic, primarily for card draw. As we establish how we're going to get to the maximum triggers possible from Eutropia per turn, we can convert our counters into cards using Fathom Mage. Grant you a card whenever a +1/+1 counter is placed on it, we can easily create a stream of enchantments to trigger Eutropia, and by proxy, Fathom Mage itself. Cold-Eyed Selkie is another synergistic card draw engine that can swiftly punish other blue players for their in-game hubris due to its Iron Walk. The card advantage it provides is derived from its ability to draw you cards equal to how much combat damage it can do to a player, an ability that can be invigorated using the counters from Eutropia, and the extra layer of evasion she grants through flying. After accumulating more value than anything King Midas touches, we need to consider how we're going to close out the game. With the capability of getting Eutropia to the point of one-shotting a hapless opponent with commander damage, the only thing standing in our way may be a pesky flyer. Traveller's Cloak is an aura that cantrips when it enters the battlefield, and gives the equipped creature land walk for any type. This does not just apply for basic land types. We can also name Gate to decimate a player that is playing on a tight budget. If there is nothing obscuring the path between you and your opponent's face, we can use a Hadana's Climb to give Eutropia Titanic Strength in a nanosecond. Starting off as an enchantment that transforms when at the beginning of combat, if the creature you target with it has 3 or more counters, it transforms into Winged Temple of Erazka, which is a land that can double a creature's power for 1 generic, a green, and a blue.